Vibrance, hue, saturation, color balance. Hi guys, we continue our acquaintance with the correction commands. And today we'll talk about vibrance, saturation and color balance. Here we go. And we'll start with vibrance. Let's create an adjustment layer called vibrance. We have opened a properties palette. And let's see. If we added vibrance, then the image becomes juicier. And if we remove it, then it becomes completely faded. Let's leave it at 0. And if vibrance creates gentle and delicate effect, then saturation affects the image more aggressively. Let's try to edit it a little. The colors become too much saturated. And also pay attention that vibrance command applies exactly to those colors that should become more juicy. For example, a girl's skin doesn't become excessively saturated. And when we work with saturation, then everything in our entire color spectrum becomes much more saturated. Let's probably put the vibrance around 60 and compare what we had and what we got. Of course, the changes are not very expressive, but still, I think that vibrance makes the photo much more expressive. You can even probably edit up to 100, but the saturation parameter also has its own application. For example, if we take a photo of this car, create a vibrance adjustment layer and edit vibrance here, then the car in general won't change very much. But if we add the saturation, then look at how expressive the car has become. If we remove the saturation by 0, then the photo becomes black and white. Let's make it red after all. Here is such a simple adjustment layer, which is called vibrance. Let's move on to the next adjustment layer, which is called hue and saturation. Let's take this photo. Let's edit a hue saturation adjustment layer. And there are much more parameters here. First, we can choose a preset from the default ones. You can sort them out and see what options there are here. It may be useful in some cases, but we will leave it by default. Next comes the color scale, which allows us to change the tone and see how we can change everything. What amazing shades can be created in this case. It is a necessary option for different creative works. The saturation parameters works as saturation. All this is very similar to how saturation worked for us in general, and the brightness parameter makes the image lighter or darker. But still, everything is somewhat more complicated here than in the previous case. I mean vibrance. For example, we can adjust individual parts of the image. To do this, we'll use this hand that you already know. After that, the cursor will take the form of an eyedropper. And let's try to change the saturation of the girl's skin color and leave everything else as it was. So I click with an eyedropper. I have a color range created and the eyedroppers become active. And look, I click and move my hand to the right and the skin color darkens. The saturation slider is moving too. But at the same time, everything else remains about the same as it was. And you can make a tan skin, like this, or you can make the girl completely pale. Well, let's make it natural, like that. And let's compare what we had and what we have now. The result, as they say, is obvious. And there is also a colorize option here. Let's see how it works. If I check this parameter now, then the photo immediately becomes monochrome. And by moving the color tone slider, you can set the shade that we need. Let's create such a vintage effect. You can also add a saturation to this tone, if necessary. And you can change its brightness, make it darker or lighter. And don't forget that you can also use a mask, which will greatly expand the arsenal of your capabilities. And now let's move on to the color balance. This is another way to colorize images. So, the color balance. We have created a color balance adjustment layer. And obviously, here we can adjust the shadows or the midtones and colors separately. Let's start with the middle tones. For example, I would like to make this photo more so autumnal. To do this, I will edit a little red color, like that. I will remove the green a little, making it more purple. And I will remove a little blue, going into more yellow shades. Now the composition looks much more like autumn and what we got. But we will not stop there and move on to the shadows. Here I will edit red color, probably that much, and just a little bit of yellow, And I still have the colors. And here I would like to keep the girl's skin pale enough. So I will move the upper slider to the left, towards the blue color. Like that. And the girl's skin remains so snow white. Let's compare. That's what we had. And now let's see what we got in the end. And in this way you can not only colorize the photos, but also remove unnecessary shades, as we did last time. Now we have so many opportunities to do the same operations, and depending on your preferences and on the features of the images, you can use one or the other. Let's move on to the homework. The first task will be to work with Vibrance in this photo and with saturation in this one. We'll also make the girl more tanned. And we'll make this photo vintage. And here you can, at your discretion, make the same autumn color as mine, or try to create some on your own. And that's all for today. It was Peter Romanov and AIM School. See you next time.